Now we've talked a little bit about vocabulary, let's talk about grammar, grammatical range and accuracy, and the 25% of your mark that comes from that band descriptor category. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about identifying the question, in particular the grammar in the question, and how we can use it to deliver an accurate response. So, listening for grammar. As we've seen, thinking about the examiner's choice of vocabulary is very important. So we can use that vocabulary to help us give a strong start. This is equally true of the examiner's grammar. It's really important to pay attention to the examiner's grammar. Now notice the difference between these two questions. Do you enjoy traveling? Have you done much traveling recently? Now, you can see that each of these questions has been given in a different tense. The first one is the present simple. Do you enjoy? Where the second one is in the present perfect. Have you done? Now that is going to influence how we give even a very simple introductory response. The first one should be answered with yes, I do, or no, I don't. Again, that present simple. Whereas the second answer would be more yes, I have, or no, I haven't. And a lot of candidates actually trip up on this simple, short response. Of course, we're going to develop the response later, but you need to make sure that you are answering accurately using the appropriate auxiliary verb, so do or have. So, do you enjoy? Yes, I do. Have you done? Yes, I have. Okay, let's look at this in a bit more detail. Now, I want you to fill in the gaps of a model answer that I'm going to put up on the screen here using the verbs that I write down on the screen in their appropriate form. So you've got to think about the tense that the verbs should appear in. Now, the question is, did you enjoy your time at school? And the answer we have here, you can see on the screen. Now I want you to fill in the gaps of this answer using these verbs here in the appropriate form. So pause the video here and see if you can insert these verbs in the appropriate location in their appropriate form. Okay, if you've done that, let's have a look to see if you got them right. Yes, I did. Did you enjoy your time at school? Did you enjoy? Yes, I did. My teachers were fantastic. So we're using the be verb in the past form for a plural subject. So we have it as were. My teachers were fantastic, really helpful, and I had. So we're moving have to the past. Everything here is in the past because we're talking about school and the question is in the past. And I had a lot of enthusiasm for my subjects. Looking back, I feel grateful. Now you may have tripped up on this one. Understandable. We'll look at that in a moment. I feel grateful that I went to a school where students and teachers respected one another. So, as I mentioned, this verb feel is very important here. We've actually deliberately used this verb feel so that we can bring in grammatical range. So for grammatical accuracy, we respond to the question in the appropriate tense, and for grammatical range, because that's what it's all about, it's grammatical range and accuracy, the band descriptor title, we need to look for opportunities to include a different tense, but in an appropriate time. So it's appropriate to say, I feel grateful, because that's the feeling right now. To be honest, in the past, often kids are not grateful about the school they go to. They just think of it as school and they have to go in. But when you're an adult in the present moment, you feel grateful that that happened, past tense, to you. So here we have the past simple as expected from us in the question, but we've also found an opportunity to increase grammatical range by adding the present simple. Now, let's look into this in a bit more detail. You can think of this as time travel, if you want to be a little bit mystical about it. So sometimes changing tenses is the natural and obvious approach, such as with this question here. Have you ever been to an art gallery? Now, you may want to answer this one yourself, just for a moment, before you have a look at my answer, which is going to come up on the screen now. Yes, I have. I've been to a few. I last went to an art gallery a few months ago when I visited London to do some sightseeing. The gallery was running an exhibition on Russian art, which I found quite fascinating. Now, what's going on here? Well, after using the present perfect to answer the initial yes-no question, so identifying the question and using the grammar from it to get started in our response, we then naturally move into the past simple. It's quite a natural progression here. It'd be a bit strange to stay in the present perfect to offer a bit more detail. But notice that we've also found an opportunity to include the past continuous too. The gallery was running. That takes a little bit more thought and consideration. Let's keep going. So another question here. Other times you may need to think outside the box for an opportunity to include another tense, or two, or even three. Of course, it's usually just going to be one or two other tenses as we're in part one and the answers aren't going to be that long. So as I mentioned a moment ago, this requires a bit more thought. Let's look at the question. What types of music do you listen to? Now again, I want you just to think about how you would answer this question and how you might take the opportunity to bring in more tenses. Now let's have a look at my answer. Oh, it's hard to say. I like lots of different genres of music. Rock, classical, hip-hop, pop. I used to listen to country, but I'm not really a fan of that anymore. Right now, I'm listening to a lot of classical music. So here, again, we've identified the question which uses the present simple. We use the present simple to open our response. Then we move into the used to form of the past, and then we find an opportunity to use the present continuous. And this is better than just staying in the present simple and saying, I like this, but I don't like this. That's fine, but it's not going to demonstrate your grammatical range. Notice that the present continuous here, that may look a little bit strange to you. I'm listening to a lot of classical music, because it usually means right at this moment, and of course you wouldn't be doing that in the exam. But we often use this to talk about a period which may change in the near future. So again, that temporary state. So I'm listening to a lot of classical music now, but maybe in a few months' time or a year, I might not listen to it so much. So it's okay to use this. It's quite useful, actually, to use this when we talk about music and anything related to tastes. Okay. Now let's look at some possible dangers or risks that could arise when we use this strategy. You need to be careful to avoid changing tenses at inappropriate times or in an inaccurate way. These are the two most common errors that appear when people try to use this time travel strategy. So make sure the context fits and don't just change tenses with no purpose. Let's have a look at an example. Do you prefer to have one particular friend or a group of friends? Again, you might consider how you would answer this question. Now let's look at my response. Personally, I prefer to have one friend. I used to have had loads of friends, but we weren't very close, and that was tiring. Now I have just a couple of really good friends, which has been much better. Hopefully you've noticed a couple of problems with this answer. Now the first problem is a problem of inaccuracy. The used to form here is inaccurate. It should be, I used to have loads of friends, not I used to have had. And the other problem is a problem of appropriacy. So one form is being used inappropriately, which is the present perfect, has been. Instead, we should be using the present simple because we've used the word now. So instead of which has been much better, we should be saying which is much better. Yes, the present simple is a little bit simpler than the present perfect, but it's still appropriate. It's not about the complexity all the time, it's about how appropriate a tense is. Okay, let's talk about the most common mistake that I hear when students try this. And that is the candidates will often use the present tense when they're being asked a question about the past. Has your fashion changed since you were a child? Now you can see this one's a little bit trickier because you've got that present perfect mixed up with the past simple. But have a go with this one again. When you've finished, listen to my answer, which I'm going to play you now. Yes, I think it has changed. When I was young, I always wear baggy jeans and bright and colourful t-shirts. But these days I am wearing more form-fitting clothes with muted colours. Now, as you can see, hopefully, there are a couple of problems with this answer. Problems that are very, very typical of the problems that are related to this idea of changing tenses. Can you identify them? Let's have a look. I always wear. I am wearing. Both of these problems are related to tense, and they use the same verb. How would you fix them? What do you think the correction should be here? It should be, I always wore. So when I was young, notice you've started in the past tense, carry on. It's appropriate to carry on. When I was young, I always wore baggy jeans. Then these days, I wear more form-fitting clothes. Not I am wearing. Should be I wear. Okay, so this is the most common mistake that comes up. So when you are asked a question that has an element of the past about it, I want a little signal to go off in your brain that says, be careful not to use the present at an inappropriate time. Okay, you got to stay in the past unless it's appropriate to move out of it. A little bit of practice for you before we finish up. Here's a question where you should be able to use what we've learnt. Remember, the first thing to do is identify the tense. Make sure you open your response in that tense and then see if you can bring in one or two other tenses. So a great question to practice this is this one. Has anyone ever taught you to dance? So try answering this now. Make sure you identify the grammar in the question, use it to open your response, and then see if you can bring in other tenses, maybe just one or two. And let's see if it's similar to mine. I'm going to play you that now. No, they haven't. I don't think I've ever had formal lessons. Having said that, I was just dancing last week at my friend's wedding, though I'm a terrible dancer as my balance is awful. Okay, so what tenses am I using here? Notice we're identifying the question, we're using the present perfect, and so therefore that's what's going to appear at the beginning here. No, they haven't. I don't think I've ever had. Okay, now let's bring in a couple more tenses. We're going to use the past continuous, I was dancing, and we're going to bring in the present simple. I'm a terrible dancer, my balance is awful. So try using this strategy of identifying the grammar in the question, using that same grammar to open your response, and then bringing in one or two other tenses to help demonstrate your grammatical range at the same time as your grammatical accuracy.